Tomorrow, President Trump will meet with the top 4 congressional leaders at the White House as the clock ticks down to a potential government shutdown on Wednesday. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer and House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, along with House Speaker Mike Johnson and Senate Majority Leader John Thune, are all expected to attend. And this comes after Trump abruptly canceled a planned meeting with Democratic leaders Thursday, calling their demands unserious and ridiculous. Well, here's what the 2 Senate leaders had to say today.
The president at this meeting is going to rant and just yell at Democrats and talk about all his alleged grievances and say this, that, and the other thing. We won't get anything done. But my hope is it'll be a serious negotiation.
What the Democrats have done here is take the federal government as a hostage, and for that matter, by extension, the American people, to try and get a whole laundry list of things that they want that special interest groups on the far left are pushing them to accomplish.
Joining me now is Ohio Congresswoman Shontel Brown. She is a member of the House Oversight and Agriculture Committees. Congresswoman, welcome so much. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. So Republicans insist they're not going to agree to Democrats' health care plans to pass a 7-week funding bill. And the White House threatens to fire rather than temporarily furlough, which typically happens during any government shutdown. They want to fire potentially tens of thousands of federal employees if the government shuts down. They want to blame it on Democrats. So the question is this a real threat or is this some kind of pressure tactic? And how can Democrats avoid being blamed for it?
Well, thanks for having me, Alex. Let me start out by saying where we are. Let me be clear about where we are. Trump's economy is hurting American people. Prices are up, jobs are down, and my Republican colleagues in Congress and Donald Trump are on the run. Donald Trump and his rubber stamp Republicans in Congress have done everything that they can to destroy health care here in America. It's past time for us to cancel these cuts to lower costs and to protect health care. Because of Trump's big, ugly bill, I want to remind Americans that 17 million Americans will lose their health care and over 20 million will see their premiums increase on average of $700 a year. So Democrats are wanting to make sure that we protect the health care. We don't want to see these Americans continue to suffer as it relates to what we're dealing with this cuts that have been established by the big ugly bill, if you will. We're talking about 22 million people and 38,000 in my district alone. This healthcare crisis is of the Republicans making, and Democrats are standing up and saying enough is enough. If you want our votes, you are going to have to negotiate with us. And one of the first rules in politics is you have to learn how to count. And yes, they need to learn how to count. And I'm talking about the Republicans.
The Senate Majority Leader, you heard him say there, John Thune, that the Democrats are making a number of demands. Is the only demand Democrats are making to sign on to this continuing resolution relative to health care?
Let me say this. I want to make sure that I am protecting the people in Ohio's 11th congressional district, and I'm going to lead the negotiations to Leader Schumer and Leader Jeffries. But what we have been abundantly clear about, is that we want to cancel these cuts. We want to lower the costs. And yes, we do want to save healthcare. Is that the only thing? I'll let the leadership decide that.
So conceding on this budget battle, it could only intensify Democratic voters' claims that this party is not fighting hard enough. If Republicans don't give in to Democrats' demands, what is the plan? What is the message to voters if the administration follows through on its threats to gut the number of federal employees?
Well, let me say this. This has been an administration of retribution, retaliation, and revenge. And we have already seen a number of cuts that have been done by this administration without the government shutdown. So to try to bully, intimidate, and threaten us with that when you're already doing it is not exactly the way that we get things done. We know that what they propose with the DOGE department has backfired. They're actually trying to rehire the people or ask the people that took buyouts to come back and return. So that to me is somewhat of an empty threat. The most important thing that we need to keep our eyes focused on is protecting the American people. This Trump economy is doing tremendous harm. This is the president who said he would promise on day one that he would lower the cost of gas, goods, and groceries. He has not done that. This is the president who also said he would be a dictator on day one. I do see him implementing dictator behavior. And what I said on the campaign trail continues to be true when we see him and how he's operating. A person who declares they're going to be a dictator on day one does not stop at day one. This is a man who wants to terminate the Constitution. He said that out of his own mouth. So the bullying, the intimidation, and threats that he presents, we have to be cautious, but we also need to look at what he's been able to execute. He's been executing the worst of his campaign promises.
Joining me right now, we have MSNBC White House correspondent Laura Barone and Capitol Hill reporter Kevin Fry, along with Shaniqua McClendon, Vice President Political Strategy at Crooked Media, and former Florida representative and MSNBC political analyst Carlos Curbelo. It's a big panel here. Laura, you know, I want to pick up with something that Yamisha just said. When the president told her that, yeah, we're going to be, you know, getting rid of a lot of people, but I'd rather not do that, can't he tell OMB Director Russ Vought, don't do that?
Good point, Alex. Yes, he can. They do not have to fire federal employees as a result of a shutdown. And as Yamish pointed out, that is typically not what happens. Federal employees are put on furlough for a time and they will not receive paychecks during that time. And so that is something that definitely hurts those employees, some of whom live paycheck to paycheck and rely on that money. But this is not something they have to do. It though matches with what the administration has been doing since President Trump took office, which is to dramatically shrink the size of the government, to gut agencies, some entirely, like USAID, because of the fact that the administration, that President Trump has wanted to do this for a long time. Russ Vought, his OMB director, has wanted to do this for a long time. Russ Vought said during the campaign trial that they wanted to traumatize federal workers. So right now it appears as though they're using the shutdown as an excuse to move forward with more of those firings.
But Laura, why is he taking this meeting, the one he canceled before on Thursday? Because we're almost at the 11th hour here with regard to when this government was shut down. Did he think that Democrats would cave earlier or something?
I think the president did think that Democrats would cave, especially since Democrats in the past, during Trump's first administration, they didn't necessarily always hold out. As we've talked about before, it's all about who has a higher pain tolerance, and President Trump is known to have a pretty high one. He doesn't appear to at all, whether it's in his comments to Yamish or his comments that he's made publicly in the last week, to be willing to negotiate. He has called Democrats' demands totally unreasonable. Democrats, meanwhile, are warning that millions of Americans stand to lose in healthcare insurance. And the one difference here, I think, between his first administration, when they were in shutdown fights, and even in March, when Democrats had the opportunity to potentially also use a shutdown as leverage against the president, is the environment that the country is in right now. And that is that Democrats' approval rating is incredibly low, and they're hearing over and over again from their voters that they want them to do something to fight the administration. And that is, I think, a bigger X factor than President Trump has faced in the past.
So, Kevin, Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries says Mike Johnson told him there had been a conversation between Republican leadership and the president. Do you know anything about the content of that talk? And did they say, hey, you need to have this meeting because otherwise, if the government shuts down, we're the ones who actually walked away?
I mean, that seems to be part of kind of what this was the setup for this meeting that's coming up on Monday, because there was let's just say that when Trump backed out of that meeting last week, it gave Democrats a major talking point. They were able basically to say that we are here, we are ready to negotiate. The president wants to walk away. He basically, Jeffries went so far as during his press conference last week to basically say, what are you afraid, bro, to kind of use his parlance. So there's this chance to have this engagement. We'll see if anything comes of it. I mean, I am reminded, though, if you look back to 2018, it was a different set of leaders. It was Schumer and Nancy Pelosi at the time. There was another conversation right in the lead up to another shutdown, and Democrats ended up kind of walking away with a victory from that, because that was where Trump more or less said, if there's a shutdown, I will take complete blame for this.
Shaniqua, the Republican line here has consistently been, this is just a short-term continuing resolution. Let's just keep spending levels the same as earlier this year. What's the best Democratic response to that?
They passed a bill earlier this year, and the White House sent over rescissions that changed the bill that they had actually passed. So I think Democrats are right to be skeptical that this is, a straightforward piece of legislation that won't come back with some changes later. But also, Democrats are trying to restore before they are gone healthcare benefits for folks. I don't think a lot of Americans who are on Medicaid realize that these changes are coming and they might not have access to health insurance. And so Democrats are doing what our entire federal government should be doing and making sure that Americans are taken care of. Donald Trump and Republicans seem to not care about that. And I do think it's worth fighting for that right now instead of making people actually suffer.
Folks, I think what you're witnessing is Republicans realizing the slogan. I've never heard it before a few months ago, but I love it. I heard some Americans say it, you guys say it, and I'm just shamelessly taking it when it's like they're the dog that caught the car, right? You know, the dogs, they love chasing the car. But of course, you never want your dog to actually catch the car because that means your dog just got hit or run over by a car. And that GOP is the hound right now because they wanted these fights. They wanted to kind of use this moment to put the screws to Democrats. But again, all it's done is really expose them. I really feel like the GOP formed a lot of bad habits back in 2010 to 2012 especially, really throughout the Obama stage, because they forgot that while it seemed to work for them back then, the incentives for voting were different. And the nature, the political map of Washington was different. Back then, when they were obstructionist and said, oh, we're going to shut things down and then just blame the Democrats for it. Well, at the time in remember what happened. Obama had this massive win in 2008, a historic win, one of the biggest wins of the last 40 years, and swept the House and won the Senate by large amounts, but took a pretty big walloping in the 2010 midterms, because back then, the midterm voter base was more conservative. Now it's flipped, right? Where the educated, high propensity voters are Democrats. Back then it was not the case, right? I think most of us remember this, right? And the Republicans won back the House, and then so controlling 1/3 of Congress, they were able to effectively shut things down and make a giant mess of it. And then Obama and the Democrats took the blame with more losses in the subsequent midterms, right? Obama stayed in, but the Democrats got weaker and weaker as Obama's term went on. And of course, it culminated in Donald Trump, right? And so I think they said, well, now we can just do this. But the problem is, one, their leadership is dumber than before. The leadership is dumber. Two, they control all three branches. And three, they're admitting it. They weren't admitting it before. Now they're saying, we want the shutdown to happen so we can create chaos. What Naomi Klein, has called disaster capitalism, right? You either create disasters or when disasters happen, you seize upon them to implement radical right-wing policy that you can never normally get away with, but you seize on this moment of crisis. But the problem is you're not supposed to say it. You're not supposed to admit to the 99% that you're planning to screw them over in catastrophic terms. But that's what they did.